I'm sorry, I need you to repeat that. A hologram of a hooded figure said, moving the hood to the side as they stared up at the four-armed, weasel-like Wellian pirate. I could have sworn you said you raided a human orphanage that sat at the edge of their systems and made off with the young to hold as hostages. The figure continued, an odd sort of calm tone in their voice. Yoop, got a bunch of good ones too. Couple actual human young along with a few Galkans, which, LL fetcha, put them back. For the love of the fabric of reality, put them the feck back before whoever runs the orphanage decides to come for all of us. The figure interrupted, tone no longer calm, but panicked, jabbing a finger at the captain, even as the surrounding crews glanced at one another in confusion, short of the first mate, who was in the brig at the back of the bridge for vehemently disagreeing with such a line of action, and now sat with said young, and only shook their head from underneath the gaggle of children sleeping on his body. Already too late, lads. I warned ya, but you didn't want to listen. The hammer-headed alien sighed, simply setting back, wincing as a few of his bruises twinged as it rubbed against the little ones, but bit back a curse. And now ye be reaping your deserts, he said as alarms screeched suddenly, waking the children up, many of the downy-covered Galkan heads popping up in alarm, spinning about. "Sir, little uns, just your caretakers coming to get ye back," the shark-like pirate said, rubbing the Galkans' heads, making them chirp lowly and settle back down with the others again, chattering softly. "Captain, ship to our aft. Looks like an old hauler type." One of the sensor officers spoke, catching everyone's attention, and confused the hammerhead for a moment. An image of the aging former cargo vessel appeared on the holoscreen, burning towards them with a vengeance. She was beaten and battered, clearly having been put lovingly back together with care over her who knew how many decades in the black, designed like an old seafaring container ship. Mac turrets replaced her cargo containers on her deck, flanking a massive cannon raised off her deck, aimed directly at them, while nose and keel were more heavily armored than in normal. Her hull sprouted more turrets to her fore and aft, with broadside cannons in between them, aimed outwards, while the eerie glow of whatever engines she now bore glowed behind her, pushing her forward in a steady pursuit. "Sir, we be out of the turret's fearing minimum effective range, but we can't do anything about her main cannon," one of the officers said, eyeing the cannon dubiously. "Not like they'll fire on us anyways. Got hostages, don't we?" they said as they smirked, only for it to fade at the Aquarian shaking his head amongst the little ones. One of the children poked their head up and giggled like a little menace. "Unka be brought floor," they giggled, making one of the other officers freeze, and slowly turned to face them. Noticeably, this officer was a carry and had agreed to this as an act of revenge, but now sported a pale complexion on their body, their massive, cycloptic eyes iris shrunk to a pinprick. "The fleur," they said slowly, before spinning around, hands flying across the console. "Sir, massive energy spike in the vessel's energy output, engines increasing heat output, they actually gonna..." The officer's report went silent as the screen showed the worn vessel rock as the main cannon fired silently into the black, a pointed shell rocketing towards them at near light speed. "Helm, adjust course. It's a low-speed Mach. Just let it pass." "Dumb hummies," the captain smirked as the ship shuddered, RCS engines strafing them up. And then they saw fire erupt from the shell zipping towards them, realigning to still hit them, and was closing distance at a rapid pace. "Saw transmission from the ship?" one of the Vox officers called out as a screen flickered, and revealed a brute of a man, squished into a chair with a crash harness overtop him and his armor, rolling a cigar between his lips with a frown of disdain. A bandana kept his hair neat underneath, while a thick beard with faint, white stripes in it adorned his face, his thick, bushy eyebrows bent down in a scowl. After taking a draw from the cigar, the human pulled it from his mouth and spoke. "This is Captain Brutus of TH Fleur de Cadaver. Ye morons got 10 seconds to hand over me nieces and nephews before me brother, and I come in there and give the lot of ye a pummelin'," came the deep, bear-like voice of the man, even as he flicked the ash forming on the end of his cigar into a tray on the arm. "Feck!" The hologram near the pirate captain whispered quietly, staring at the same screen the captain was. "And what's a human pirate got with a bunch of cast-offs and nobodies?" The Wellian growled back, narrowing his eyes at the brute of a human staring back, even as the room the man sat in seemed to shake, lights flickering. Nearby, the helmsman on the Wellian pirate's ship cursed viciously and pulled hard on the controls, the ship's artificial gravity systems fighting to keep the rapid velocity change from affecting the organic occupants. "That bunch o' cast-offs and nobodies, as ye call them, the brute said, as a slow grin spread across his face, revealing a metal tooth in his grill. Happen to be me brother's adopted family, Macon and me family. May not agree with me straight-laced brother on much, but something we both agree on is yea, don't touch our family, stoat brain. So odd best be ready to hand him back unharmed. The transmission cut out just as the sensor operator yelled, "Brace for impact." The entire ship shook, waking up the other kids, while the ones who had been awake giggled playfully. On Kabi's my one giggled. Several pirates surrounded the spike-like projectile that had punched a hole in their ship, splitting the deck apart. The back half, just before the engine on it, thankfully had a flange and had sealed the air in. What worried them most, though, was the hatch on the side opened up, showing signs of literally being forced through the deck that should have, by rights, kept it shut. Criffing. The thaw was in this thing, one said as they inched closer to the ruined marks on the floor. No clue, another said as they slowly walked closer to the thing and peeked inside. Huh, they mumbled. Only one crash harness is up. All the others are still down. Wait, the pilot's one is up too. You don't say, a deep voice said behind them, right before a massive, metal-covered fist appeared where their head had been, the pirate themselves now embedded in the opposite wall. Now the real fun begins, the towering human smirked, rolling his shoulders as he calmly lit a fresh cigar he pulled from a pouch on his armor. Ain't that right? He asked a smaller figure, who was lighting their own corncob pipe, and gave a grin up at the other. Yep, let's go and say hello, said a lighter, more bubbly voice, though it had a raspy edge to it, like someone who was used to belting out orders and having them follow to the dot. I'm one tough gazukas which hates all palukas, what ain't be on the up and the square. An eerie, jovial shanty rang out through the corridor, much to the huddling pirate's horror, the words distorted either by a speech impediment or likely the corncob pipe in the singer's mouth. Sawn off a criffing thaw, we should have never gone to that station. Just what in the 7 rings of torment did the captain piss off this time? One pirate whispered, poking their head out of the corridor. A light down the hall suddenly had a silhouette of a human wearing an officer's cap and a pipe passed through it, forcing them to duck back down into the cupboard. So oi biffs and oi buffs em, and always out roughs em, the voice continued before trailing off quieter down the hall, making the pirates sigh with relief. Thank the void he didn't turn down the hall. There's no way he wouldn't have found us. Another pirate whispered softly, leaning against the wall. But none of them gets nowhere. Twin fists punched through the bulkhead besides them, ripping a hole through the wall, right as a wiry form grabs the pirate that had been against the wall and snaps them in half like a toothpick. Throwing them to the side, the sound of a hissing piston heard just before a punch is thrown, and the faint light in the cupboard showed a piston, jutting out of the elbow area along the back of the bulky forearm slamming forward with the blow, helping drive the fist through his opponent's chest. The bridge was, understandably, in a tizzy, officers sprinting left and right, barking orders, and getting worrying reports from the lower decks. Outside the ship, the Fleur de Cadaver kept pace like some sort of horrific specter hounding them, her cannons tracking them closely, not letting go them once, keeping them locked in, even if the main cannon was no longer aimed at them. Sir, multiple injuries on the lower decks, blunt injuries, broken bones, snapped limbs by the sounds of it. One officer called out as another ran up, panting. The officer in question looked terrible, armor beaten and tattered, dented in various places by what looked like a fist, though oddly, it looked like the armor was twisted around said fist mark. Sir, we can't stop them, and getting close is virtual suicide, they said as they tried to pull themselves together as the Captain Wellion snarled, pulling out a small, black vial, and began to load it into his armor. All this for a bunch of cast-offs. He snarled under his breath as multiple troopers surrounded the doorway that had just slammed shut, the sound of pneumatic locks hissing shut. Boom! A massive fist suddenly appeared in the door on one side. Boom! Another fist, similar size, but set lower, and a different shape, appeared on the other side, forcing the door off its rails, even as the metal tried to hold firm. Bang! The doors flew off their hinges as a duo of laughter rang out, one deep and harsh, the other lighter, more jovial, though a chaotic tone accompanied it. A gug-gug-gug-gug. And stepping of the shadows was the hulking form of dread privateer Bluto the Terrible, his trademark smirk on his face. And at his side was the smaller, laughing form of a wiry human, one eye unable to see thanks to a deformity on one side of his face, the result of countless fistfight he had likely gotten in and rumored to have won. His corncob pipe angled in the air as he grinned widely, though his working eye panned about the room, locking onto each of the soldiers and pirates, noting their position. All while he tore the lid off a can of a green, leafy food with his bulky hands, calmly tipping it back before swallowing, smirking. "So," former Commodore Frank Popeye Fegel said, as the synthetic skin on his bulky lower arms separated along his wrists, his fists beginning to spin as capacitors in his arms whined loudly. "Who's da palucas om pummelin tate?" he said with a vicious grin.